We also do training and capacity building for nature educators to teach about birds in the Indian context. And we have, for example, a workshop called How to Be a Birding Buddy, which is builds capacity in educators, even somebody who's never taught about birds ever in their life before. You know how you can get started on doing that, giving them the tools and the resources and on getting started. And we have done this across the country in collaboration with several local groups and organizations. And we've also done it online since the post the lockdown era. We also have a handbook for bird educators. And I'm just going through all of our work that is most relevant to educators, since that's largely the audience in this session. So the handbook is a very beautifully illustrated book of tips, tricks, projects, activities, and general like a toolkit or like a Kickstarter on how you can, again, connect children to birds. And yeah, this also can be downloaded for free from our website. Or if you prefer a print version, you can also get it at our shop. And we're really, really proud to say that this handbook, since it's launched, has been downloaded in almost every continent. So if you're in Antarctica, please download it so we can have it downloaded in all continents. Yeah. And then recently, as of this week, we also have launched a survey for nature educators, which Abhisheka will post a link to it in the chat. So we are really eager that our work reflects the needs of the nature educator community in India. So this survey is to basically assess what people are doing across the country and to see how we can support these efforts. So if you're an educator, nature educator, take kids or adults on bird walks, or you want to get started but don't know how, please let us know what kind of support you need on this survey, and that would really inform the direction of our program. Yeah, so that was a little broad overview of Early Bird. We'll share links and other, our social media handles in the chat in the duration of the session. Bringing us to today. So today is one in a series of online sessions we have been doing to engage our community of nature and bird educators. And we've done several in the past on one every month since June this year on themes like art and nature education, community building and nature education. And in it, we've had speakers from the community who are practicing nature education in innovative ways. And they've sort of led the discussion on the specific theme. Today's session is actually very special because it came as a suggestion from our past sessions. And of course, this is an important aspect to nature education that we need to throw focus on. So we hope to get started and take the first step on that today. Yeah, so just to get started and to like sort of just get a pulse of where we're at, I want to do a small exercise. So I know all of you all have come from various parts of the country, but in terms of our experience with nature, we may have more in common and more shared experiences than we realize. So if you could answer this small question, so let's just try to see where we're at and what we have in common and what we really share in connecting with nature and the natural world. I hope you can see my screen. So there's this question on the screen. To answer this, you can go to the Mentimeter link in the chat and type in one word, 2 words, many words, however you want to respond to this question of like, how do you feel when you are in nature? So whether you are sitting under a tree or walking up a hill, watching birds at a lake, whatever the nature that's around you or that you're mostly in, how do you feel when you are in a natural space? I hope everybody, okay. I hope everybody can access the link and are able to type in. Yeah, great. If you cannot access the link through the chat box, you can also go to menti.com and use the code, the numerical code that's on top of the screen. Okay, we have some responses coming in. Centered, that is so true. Centered, calm, relaxed, active, alive. Yeah, it truly feel alive when we're in nature. Oneness, peaceful. These are lovely responses. Happy. That is true. Wonder. Curious, free. As you can see, these are really positive emotions that take us closer to our authentic self and our own nature. I feel that. Okay, blissful, related. That is an interesting response. A sense of belonging. That is also so true. We feel it's very primal to even just touch a leaf or a tree and be connected to the natural world in any small way. Lively, observant, focused. Really nice. Thank you for sharing. I hope all of you were able to share your thoughts and feelings. I'm going to go to another question. So we're going to talk a lot about all of these expressions that you all have shared. Thank you so much for sharing. We have another question. Let me just go to that. Okay, this is a little bit of the opposite end of the spectrum of how do you feel when you are disconnected or cut off from nature, which we all might have recently experienced this. I know I did, especially in the lockdown time. I'm sorry, I'm having. Okay. Any idea how do I go to the next slide? See people. Okay. Wait. Okay. I'm going to try and go to the next slide. I hope you can still see my screen. Yeah. Yeah. So for example, in the lockdown time, how did that make you feel when we were, just cooped up indoors and couldn't even go out like to the next road or to the park down the road? How did this make you feel? Oh, yeah. What did you experience when you got cut off from the natural world? Again, you can use this code to share your responses. Irritable, frustrated, very much. I totally related to this. I missed a very odd thing in the lockdown, which I didn't even realize I valued so much, which is I really missed wind. And it was very odd for me. Like I just missed movement from the environment. And it took me some time. And I never thought in my life I would miss wind, but I did. Lost. Yeah, I think that's very true. Suffocated, lonely, yeah, depressed, disconnected, weird, fish out of water, missing trees. Yeah, so many aspects of nature were missed. The lockdown, sad, restless, lovely, untethered, looking for nature around. Wow. Thank you. This really was a good start. I'm going to stop the screen now. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, that I think sets a good context for why we are all here today and why we all believe this session is important. So I'm going to jump right in. We have some very speakers who do some very interesting work today, and let's just go directly and hear from them. So to begin with, we have Amrita Amrita is, she works on, just give me a second. Yeah. So Amrita is on the founding team of Apni Shala and works deeply on socio-emotional learning. This is a unique approach to education, which she will go into today in the context of nature and well-being. She's also worked in counseling and actively in the theater of the oppressed, which is, so she's worked a lot with under-resourced communities and those that may not have the same opportunities as, or privileges that some of us enjoy. And she also has facilitated groups in diversity and inclusion, so in Mumbai. And so we're really excited to have Amrita in this discussion today. Amrita will introduce herself and her work in her own words. So Amrita, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Shonali, and good morning to everyone. I'll try and share a little bit about myself through pictures of my journey. Part of it through the work that I do, part of it through parallelly what is happening in my life and the people that are part of it. And hopefully that should give you some sense of, where I come from, where I'm at in my own journey. Is the screen visible? So just 1 second.
It's visible, Amrita.
It's sorry. I don't know why it's not going into slideshow. Got it. Yeah. Okay. So I'm Amrita. My journey in the work that I do began as an educator. So a lot of what I started doing was sometimes in school, sometimes in informal or non-formal education settings. And what I would do was mostly using a lot of arts, a lot of stories, books, theater to create spaces where students could feel that well-being was nurtured. And what we call this and what a lot of people know it as today is social emotional learning. I initially did this in my own work while I was exploring where I wanted to go in my life journey, and then gradually was able to do this through the organization I work with, which is Apni Shala. Initially, of course, my work started working with young people, so I used to be a lot more in the classrooms with students and surrounded by these young people that you see, some of them on the screen. Gradually, it moved into working a lot more with adults and educators, where some of my work moved into training and how do you take SEL into classrooms or into different settings that a lot of other educators, mental health professionals work in doing this, we were also building a team at Apni Shala. So we started off as 3 people that began this as a dream, and then it grew to a team of now about 42, 43 people. And I have the joy and privilege of having worked with all of them, and in different ways that they take their passion and their skills and knowledge and wisdom into the classrooms that they are now leading. In the journey of growing with this team, I think that I've had a parallel journey of getting to know myself, discovering who I am and what I do. And I think that while I'm an educator, I'm also a bird watcher. I think that that's a big part of my identity and what I do every chance I get. I'm an aunt and a co-learner with a lot of young people that I spend time with. Some of them are my nieces, some of them are a lot of children of friends that I have. A little snippet of what it means to be an aunt and an explorer. This is a little snippet of a journal that my niece keeps from very long ago when we started exploring nature together. And just the emotion that it evokes was lovely. So I picked up this from a picture of her journey. And what is lovely for me now to explore is that people are now taking this in their own way into the classroom. So the people that I work with at Apni Shala have found that way on their own. I'm going to just end my introduction with a poem by Mary Oliver that I found in my journey with my own well-being and mental health, when at one point I was struggling with it. And what I do ask from a lot of people now as I interact with them is that, what do you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Yeah, I'm going to stop at that. I know that it may not be enough time to read through the poem, but maybe towards the end I can also drop a link in the chat. It's a poem that I resonate with a lot and I find has helped me through my journey.
Thank you so much, Amrita. That was really heartwarming, especially that letter from that child. And yeah, we're really eager to know more and more stories from you. We also have Jayshree Oberoi with us today. Jayshree works in nonprofit management and school leadership and development, and she's an India School Leadership Institution Fellow. Currently, she's the Senior Director on Multiply Initiatives at Akanksha Foundation. Sorry about my dog barking. I hope it's not too intrusive. Yeah, Jayshree is passionate also about socio-emotional and ethical learning. And we're really excited about the perspective she brings off from being for so many years in mainstream education with academic curriculum and school development, and how well-being and nature fits into these spaces. So I'll just hand it over to Jayshree to just give us a sweet introduction to yourself and your work.
Thank you so much, Shonali, and good morning to everyone. It's interesting that now when I look back in the last 10, 11 years, it's primarily academic and mainstream education. But I started my journey as a young child growing up in a small village, surrounded by trees, fields, mountains, and just being very, very close to nature, just wondering, when you look at the scorpion and a snake and at the same time, turn the rocks around to see what comes out of, from under the rocks. So that's been kind of a, little child that I grew up in my early years, and then very soon moved to Mumbai. Very passionate about nature, so wanted to get into wildlife, and I started working with WII on a project in Velavadar. And within 6 to 8 months, I realized that while I'm very passionate about nature and environment, I'm very interested in talking to people and talking to them about, why should we really observe? Why should we really care about nature, and what does it do to me very intuitively from my own experiences? And that's when I discovered there is something called environment education. From there, kind of fast forwarding, I joined World Wildlife Fund. Then I worked at an aquarium in US for almost 8 years. Also taught as a science educator. And all through this journey, nature education stayed always at the core of what I did throughout my different aspects of my work. Last 10 years at Akanksha, when we're working with underprivileged children, we have 26 schools across Mumbai, Pune, Nagpur, work with 5 municipal corporations. Somewhere nature education, and it has to be brought to the children, to the educators, and what it does to us as individuals, stayed no matter which role I played. And I was a school leader, a school principal, so tried to bring in a lot of that for the students as well as for teachers. Socio-emotional learning in a formal way for me was introduced only about, I would say, 3 years ago through a program, but as Akanksha from the time I joined. So a lot of informal spaces, a lot of programs already were existing. So that is how I started connecting with the concepts of socio-emotional learning, what it can do. And then, being interested in nature, being in formal education, and then now being part of C-learning and CBCT, cognitive-based compassion training, the link started to become a lot more visible for myself. And that is when I got on the journey of making it visible for my co-educators and others. So that's kind of my journey of last many years in 3 different fields of formal education, SEL, and nature. And I think it just starts with self. That is where I feel. Yeah, thank you, Shonali. Very excited to be here and listen to everyone as well.
Thank you. Thank you for like giving us time today. Yeah, where really we work so much in, I mean, we work a lot in the informal sort of space, and we have though many teachers and people who work in schools and teach in schools in our communities. So we're really lucky to have you with us here today. And yeah, we hope to go down that tangent in our conversation. We also have with us today Tanya Ginwala. She's based out of Dharamshala, and she's a she engages with nature-based therapy and wilderness. She's a wilderness therapist. Now, this is little heard of in India today, but Tanya's, I think, one of the pioneers in this field. And she also has a background in experiential education and clinical psychology, which I think probably strengthens your work and as a practitioner. She's worked with diverse audiences and is passionate about the intersectionality between adventure, nature, and mental health. So Tanya, please tell us more about what you do and yourself.
Thank you, Shonali, and good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to be with all of you today. I'm just going to share my screen. 1 minute, let me just make it. Maybe you can just let me know if you can see it in full screen mode.
Yeah, we can see your screen. Yeah, now it's full screen.
Okay. Yeah. So a little bit about me and my journey with adventure and nature-based therapy is, so I moved to Dharamshala during the pandemic. I think I was experiencing a lot of what all of you mentioned in that second question, and realizing I came to work from here for a few weeks and realized that this is really where I need to be. So moved here with my 15-year-old dog, who's also been a companion and friend who's taught me so much about what it means to relate with the natural world. So nature has always been a huge resource and safe space for me growing up. And lately, actually, I've been also, just building a relationship more with birds. That's more recent for me. But I have there is like a group of white-rumped vultures in the pine forest where I live. And so I've been observing them and realizing that they are critically endangered in our valley. But just for the last year and a half, been really observing them and learning so much. So this is what the trails near my home look like. And again, it's a huge resource for me as a therapist and just as a human being here. A lot of my work and influences are, come from narrative therapy, from somatic approaches. So I'll be drawing from there today as I share with you. And largely also from my work with the disability community. For 3 years, I've worked with taking people with physical disabilities outdoors and promoting social inclusion through having people with and without disabilities engage in outdoor adventures together. So I'll be drawing from some of that today as I also share with you. Yeah, and now we run adventure nature-based therapy programs here from Dharamshala twice a year. And this is what our campsites look like. And so we lead like 8-day journeys for folks who would like to explore collaborating with the natural world for their healing. I was also lucky to go to a Krishnamurti school growing up. And I think Krishnamurti is one of the first like sort of deep ecologists really in terms of how he writes about his relationship with nature. And this is one of the quotes that really resonates for me. And I just wanted to leave, I'm not going to read it out, but just wanted to share also another one of these influences. I'm really passionate about decolonizing our relationship with nature and what could that look like, and also decolonizing our understanding of mental health and going back to old ways of knowing and moving through the world that are actually quite in alignment with the natural world. So yeah, I just wanted to share this piece about in the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, what the community had to say about Western mental health practitioners coming in and just sort of coming in with treatments that they felt would be supportive, but towards the end, the person is saying that there was no drumming, there was no time in the sun and being in the community, and they had to ask people to leave because it just wasn't supportive. So I'm just been reconstructing that relationship and growing it. So I'm excited to be here with all of you and share that today a little bit.
Thank you, Tanya. That was really really insightful, and yeah, actually we have to think more deeply about that. I wish we had time to go into that today, but we're really excited for that you look at how you can tie or interweave Eastern perspectives and current Western practices. And I think, yeah, that is so latent, and if we're not mindful about that, we sort of miss it or it slips through the cracks. So I would love to hear more about that in the session today. I just want to, before we move ahead, just say that this session would not have been possible without the help of Roshni, who's also here, Roshni Ravi and Subhadra Devi, who actually got this process started and led us to Tanya, Jayshree and Amrita. So thank you, Roshni and Subhadra, who couldn't make it, but thank you so much. They'll soon be developing more work and literature on this theme, which we will share with you all going forward. But yeah, thank you. So just to jump right into the discussion, but somebody had their hand raised. I just wanted to ask if...
It was Mohana.
Yeah. Mohana, yes. Mohana, if you have a question, you could maybe type it into the chat and we will come around to the question in between our in our discussion. Thank you. So just to begin with, and to set the context, could you just sort of briefly share what is well-being, the way you look at it, and why should it be central to our teaching and learning spaces? And feel free to jump in whenever, three of you. So, yeah.
Should I go first? Is that okay?
Yeah, please go ahead.
I think for an individual, we talk a lot about when the person is not in their well-being space. Like that's how it comes back to what is well-being at many times. So one of the essential component I feel is just the emotional component, the physical component, and the cognitive spaces. All three of them, when a person is able to really recognize where I am, more of a self-awareness, and is also able to recognize when I'm not in that space where I want to be emotionally, physically, as well as cognitively, and be able to come back to that with the tools that they feel most comfortable with. It's an individual choice, it's an individual awareness, and it's an individual way of coming back to it. I think is the essence of the well-being, that being able to recognize what is helping me be who I am, do what I want to do, and be supportive for self and for others. So there's a lot of peace, a lot of compassion and a self-compassion that comes into it. So well-being in all, I feel, is a combination of all of these three things through a process, but for a purpose of taking care of self and for others as well. And that's how I would put it for me. Over to you, Tanya, or Amrita.
Yeah, I can go. So I think I would sort of define well-being as like a general sense of health and happiness. And if we're looking at it through like a somatic, like nervous system perspective, we can only learn and heal and grow if our nervous systems are feeling relatively safe and connected, right? Because that's when we're able to absorb and truly engage. So I think that's where that intersection comes in of looking at nature then also as a space that can make us feel connected and calm. And then through that, having access to new information and meaning making and re-evaluating certain things that we know. Right. So I think it's so essential that we find ways, like Jayshree said, like find what makes us feel good, what makes us feel safe, and find that baseline. And through that, and so many children are so afraid while they're learning in different ways, or they're not feeling safe. So I think for me, it really boils down to safety and a sense of agency and choice. Yeah.
I'd only add that I think that one of the things I drew from what both Jayshree and Tanya said was that the idea that well-being you won't say that it's something you arrive at or it's like a destination. That the whole thing about it being constantly striving towards being there, because the truth of it is that when we're all living our realities, we're also operating in the middle of a lot of structural and systemic inequity and injustice. And you're constantly responding to all of that. So when you talk about well-being, it won't ever be something that is, I have achieved and I'm okay at it with it, but I will consistently need to respond to what is happening around me. And that constant striving to be in that space of feeling safe or feeling nurtured, I think that's what I would just add as what I think well-being is.
Okay. Yeah, I think you all mentioned very concepts or ideas that are actually should be fundamental to education practices, more so in nature and the outdoors, like agency and safety. And so how could you, okay, so you like Amrita said, well-being is not, it's not like a final destination kind of thing, and also so much of our mainstream education, especially in India, is based on that final goal, like either a mark or a grade or those kind of assessments. So but how do you really observe well-being, like in an individual, or observe changes in well-being? We obviously can't give a grade or a B or C or or a 90 or 100. So how do you really observe well-being, or observe the changes that takes place in an individual in terms of their well-being? Again, any of you can just go.
I can begin. I think it's exactly what you said, Shonali, that we're in this system which tries to put down a mark or a score for everything. So if you can tell me that I have learned addition, can you tell me that I have learned how to be self-aware, and whether I have learned how to regulate and manage emotions, and whether I've learned how to make decisions or be compassionate? And I don't think that's how it works. That it is for everybody the starting point of how I manage my emotions or how I relate with myself will be very, very different. So trying to use one benchmark and say that let's try and see if everybody is able to be equally self-aware, and that self-awareness would mean the same thing for everyone, I don't think is possible. So the way that we have done it at Apni Shala and how we discuss this with children is that it's usually a lot of conversational spaces and work with mediums that allow children to express themselves. So a lot of art, a lot of theater, I think those are ways in which we're able to gauge how students are relating to their own social and emotional development. And that's one way that we pick it up. A lot of anecdotes, testimonials from what students share of what is changing for them. That I used to feel like when I'm getting angry, I didn't know what's happening in my body, but now I can say that, there is a little ball in my stomach that I can feel now. and that I am able to do something about it. I take a step back, or I breathe for a little bit, or I leave the room and then I come back. For a student to be able to say that, I think for me that would be an indicator of whether it's happening or not.
So it's a lot of self-awareness, like especially from the point of view of on this. While we're on this subject, could you just give us a short like understanding of what is socio-emotional learning?
Jayshree, do you want to begin with this, and then I can add, because there are several different frameworks of how social emotional learning is viewed and how people understand it. So Jayshree and I maybe, and then Tanya, if you want to add from also how you all view it, we can.
Sure. I can begin with this. I think the way we've been looking at it is developing specific essential skills for students to be able to understand for themselves. Everything, it's more around self-awareness, like starting with body literacy to emotional literacy to changes in that, and just being aware of what is causing those changes, because that again becomes very important, that what is my trigger, or what is my nurturing space, or what is my resource. So all of those coming to self-awareness. From there, moving to whenever I'm not in that safe space for myself, being aware of that, and also recognizing what resources will help me come back to myself. So, building awareness about resilience. So self-awareness, resilience, and then the purpose of this is to be able to take care of yourself as part of self-compassion and extend that empathy, extend that compassion to others, to be able to make anything that's possible, change anything that's possible. So that wishful thinking, looking at alleviating distress or alleviating suffering of others. So it's a journey, and the way we are looking at it's socio-emotional learning as in understanding of the skills, building those skills over a period of time, and embodying. It takes very long. When I say embodying, I'm completely aware that it takes years. Sometimes it's a lifelong journey, but doing with that understanding that at some point the learner should embody those skills for themselves. So this is how we're looking at social emotional learning in Akanksha, and connecting with what Amrita said about learning for younger children. A learner will be in their best frame of mind to learn anything when they feel connected with another, with the teacher. At the same time, they feel safe in that space, and they feel they are able to really focus all of their attention in terms of their emotional space and their cognitive space to what they're learning. All of this is possible when we create those spaces for them to be able to recognize their feelings, emotions. So you have those spaces where there is a, gratitude corner, maybe there is a emotions corner. There are spaces like circle time and, class meetings when you are able to share what you're going through very openly. You have a peer group that supports you through your small support groups. You also have your reflection journals. You have that relationship and bond created with your teacher where you have an adult who supports you. So all of these spaces need to be created so that the child feels, the learner feels safe to be able to, and be also in a space of learning for themselves, and then is ready to kind of learn. So SEL actually lays the foundation. It lays the, nutritious or nourishes ground for developing all the other skills that are required. So that is how we would look at SEL in Akanksha and the work we do with the children. Yeah, Tanya, would you like to pick it up from here?
Yeah, sure. I forgot to mention earlier that my very early volunteering experiences was at an Akanksha school. So it's a sweet connection, actually, as I'm hearing you speak. There's so many of these images coming up. So I think if we talk about sort of how do we observe well-being, and I've kind of gone back to look at what folks who've been on adventure therapy programs have shared, or what they've shared after going on these forest bathing walks. And I just sort of really went back to say, okay, let's look at those observations. And it's interesting because no matter what your need is at that time, it feels like nature and adventure can sort of cater to that for each person. So sometimes it's experiencing lowered anxiety when outdoors, and I'm talking about mostly with adults, right? Because I work primarily with adults. There's also this ability to sort of ask for help and recognize that we can't do anything alone. There's also, just not maybe as much dependence on medication for stabilizing like blood pressure and sugar levels. That's something that participants have reported as well. And also just having space for silence, right? And to process and move through big emotions, especially something like grief, which is so big and hard to hold, that I myself have found that just that nature seems to be one of the only containers that can hold something that large for me. So I've also heard a lot of participants say, yeah, I was just able to be and co-regulate and soothe myself, but also be soothed by nature with big emotions. And just this whole thing of like sort of being gentler on ourselves, because when we do adventure stuff, and maybe I can talk about that briefly, but we're also looking at how do you build that relationship with the body, and folks finding out that, oh, I actually want to be gentler and not so pushy with my body, and more of like tuning in and listening. So yeah, these are some of just a few of the indicators of well-being.
That's actually pretty tangible. It's more tangible than we realize. And like some of the responses in the beginning of the session to the Mentimeter reflect exactly what you just said. I really like that you compared it to that, what you said about grief and nature being a container large enough to hold it. That's really insightful, because this explains the feeling of when you're in the room for so long and the walls start to close in on you, and how that affects. And what I really take away from what you just said, Tanya, is the being in the outdoors also strengthens this bridge between our mind and our body, our physical and mental states, because being indoors really sometimes can be, especially working at a laptop constantly, can sometimes just disconnect from my bodily physical experience, because I'm getting so much into my own like mental state, or the other way around, and the bridge is really important. On that note, actually, it would be nice to hear from you all on like, a big or small exercise, some kind of exercise or activity or experience that you've had, or some small exercise that you use to bring focus to nature and well-being in your work.
I can.
Yeah, please, you can just go ahead. Yeah.
So I think that when we look at the work that we're doing with students at Apni Shala, one of the ways that we begin is actually, so some of the work we do is also informed by mindfulness practices. And one way that we sort of also unpack mindfulness at Apni Shala is that how do you keep coming back to the present and be able to just stay in what the moment right now is offering to me. So one way we begin doing that is to sort of listen to what our body is telling us about sensory inputs around us. So what are the smells? What are the sounds? What am I seeing? What are the colors, textures, patterns around me? And I think that's one small way that we usually begin with a lot of the young learners, just to walk around the school and whatever it is that the natural world has to offer to me in that walk. Are there some of these little things that I can take in? What am I noticing about that? Another way that we found that is that there are different times in the year that the natural world offers lovely gifts to us to explore. And one example that I can think of most recently, when the monsoons were here and the students were walking around the corridors and just outside school, and they noticed the snails that were around the compound of the school. So it began with a lot of how do I exercise my control as this big person over that little snail? So it started with things like, can I pick it up and throw it around? And for many of them, even like this urge to stamp on it or do something to it. And then it gradually moved into conversations in the classroom about kindness. And they were exploring kindness through that month. And we spoke about what would kindness look like then to animals and to the world around us. And it didn't take very long before they started to talk about the habitat of the snail and what the snail does on a regular basis, and then following the little trail of the snail without having this need to now touch it or like move it around. So I think that those are a few small things that you can start with. A lot of observing, just walking and noticing what's happening.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
Amrita, so beautifully put all the experiences for the students together in a whole sequence. I can imagine one of the Akanksha schools doing that for our students. I just want to extend it a little bit here, doing something very similar for the teachers as well. Very, very consciously, because when the adult connects very consciously, the children will automatically connect. So building that for the adults is something we try and do very consciously. Again, through grounding exercises, resourcing exercises, mindfulness, connecting very, very consciously when you're designing planning for the teachers. How do you connect with elements in the nature or what they see around or what their personal experiences have been, bringing the resources that they have experienced, whether a beautiful place they have been to or any connection they have had with the nature. So when the adults connect very consciously, they model it for the students in the classroom and the students start to see that. And Amrita has taken us on our next journey from there. One more thing I want to add here is that especially in urban setups and where we work with children from underprivileged background, the buildings are not always very, very conducive spaces in many ways. And there is no opportunity for a lot of outdoor experience for the children, and either their families can afford or take them out to a lot of places that we, some of us are able to. So bringing nature in the classroom in smaller, bits and pieces where we can, like just having a little garden on the window or, a few plants on the window, or, developing a garden together with children in the backyard and giving them opportunities to be there and observe and make their notes, connect with a plant or connect with, a flower that's going to connect with a bud that's going to bloom in few days. All of these little things. So very consciously, when as educators, we try and connect with what is available as a resource, as becomes the powerful tool. And that is where the educators try to do that once they themselves are into it, with their heart and with their head. So while I'm connecting science lessons, when I'm connecting different language, exercises or anything from the ecology, they're connecting with the heart as well, where compassion is coming. And like Amrita said, if it's a snail or another, little animal or a lizard shows up in a classroom, and suddenly there is a huge chaos, like how do you really take all of these movements to turn them into something that we've been learning about all of these SEL or science concepts or any other concepts. So it's a beautiful combination of three. And I think there are so many opportunities. One just needs to look for those and grab those. And once the educators are on the same line, they are able to do that without having any prescription or any lesson plans or any of that. They create those on the go.
Okay, I really like that, the heart and the head. I think that's really insightful. Even when thinking of a workshop or any kind of like activity, connect with the heart and the head. I think we can all use that in our work. Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, I wanted to pick up on something you said for Tanya. Jayshree is talking about access to the outdoors. So in the exercises that you are in, the way that you practice, nature therapy or wilderness therapy, and the exercises or activities that you might do, how does this access play a role? Because I know you largely do work in the outdoors, but is it a limiting factor when you're not? What kind of things can you do, when you maybe don't have that much access to nature, and what do you do when you are?
Right. So I firstly also resonate with a lot of what you all have shared so far, about this aspect. And I think the pandemic gave me a good opportunity to get very creative, because my practice moved online, and that was both something that supported me to live in a space where there is more of nature around, but I also have found ways to connect people to nature even while through conversation. So we use there's lots of metaphors that come up, that are involving, of course, inspired by nature, that we kind of connect with. It's interesting, but a lot of people will approach me for online therapy because they are drawn to the nature-based approach, and we haven't really gotten to work together in person and be outdoors together, but they're inclined towards that, or they know that nature is somewhere they feel good. And so either we will, of course, there's always metaphors and poems that we will access in session, or they will sometimes see me from an outdoor space. So we plan that they go and spend time in an outdoor space and do sessions online. So I'm saying this, the online space is really about this, no, that, okay, then how do we still do this work? And it's more about
I think Tanya is briefly frozen. She will come back. Abhi, you have your hand raised?
Yes.
and yeah.
We'll just give her a... Oh, she's back.
Sorry,
No problem.
But yeah, that's what I think it's about, how do we support people to foster that relationship with nature, whether it becomes a resource that they can access, and how do we bring that awareness to folks? And there are so many creative ways to do that. And I think looking at us as nature, so I try to not do this separation of nature versus us, but the more we're looking at our bodies are nature, our food is nature, no, all of that. So trying to get away from this separation of, oh, I'm not outdoors, but nature's all around you. So we're trying to kind of dissolve that binary.
That's very true. And like connecting with yourself is in a way connecting with the nature, because that is your nature, your balanced, going closer to your more balanced state of being is also going closer to what is most natural to you, that will, and things start to align. Yeah, that is insightful. Yeah, the lockdown must have been quite a challenge in your work. Maybe you could share some insights that you had from that adaptation process. Abhi, do you have something to?
There were a couple of questions. Since also Jayshree mentioned about urban space, I thought I could just jump in here.
Yeah, let's do that.
So this one question by Nishant, who says, even in urban spaces for well-being, first people need to understand the connection with nature. How can social media be useful to create awareness about the connection between nature and well-being? Can it be a good medium to bring people closer to nature? Would any of you like to take this question?
So I can share some of the examples, especially during pandemic, when we went online and we started to use a lot of whether WhatsApp messaging and of course online lessons and so on, but specifically to social media. If you're talking about what children have access to, is a lot of Facebook, WhatsApp, and things like that. In urban spaces, we have seen. We've not very extensively used it, but the thoughts that come to mind, that if there are changes happening around the city and particular types of plants, or change, you see certain birds, like just day before yesterday, we had 3 gray hornbills right next to my house, and we live in a pretty urban area, and there was so much talk about it in my daughter's school. I was very pleasantly surprised that children were all talking about it, and each one of them is sharing that, do you get to see this? Because this is happening after pandemic, that hornbills are visible very close to our homes here. So that kind of a conversation. or children posting things with specific assignment. There's a lot of season watch activities I feel are really powerful for children to connect with each other on those, that while they entering data, and this is one of the initiatives by Early Bird themselves, the organization here too, so they can talk more about it. But I've seen that, those conversations have been really helpful. So while there are a lot of trees and there is a lot of diversity, if we go around that, if there is a lot of diversity of birds and other, little beings like insects and things like that, there is a lot of scope to connect students with that and use social media platforms to do that. I hope that makes sense. I'm just talking from what we tried to do during pandemic and use the digital media available for children. Just I want to add here that it's also been a challenge, especially if we're working with children from underprivileged background, because not all of them have access to it. Not all of them have access to smartphones, and especially after now we are back in physical or kind of a digital physical combination of a school. Now, the access has gone a little bit down. So how do we use both the spaces, the school spaces as well as the online spaces, is the next question that we as educators are thinking about. Yeah, anything you want to add, Amrita or Tanya, please?
I just want to introduce this term like nearby nature. I think initially one of the hopes I used to do therapy in parks, in urban spaces, and would meet clients on walks in parks. And the idea was to also connect them with their closest sort of park or green space around. So I think that it's also essential that we don't look to spending time in nature as that once a year thing where we go on a trip to the mountains, but we look at it more as a daily ritual. And whether it's observing that one tree outside your window and as it changes through the seasons, or just and I think what that does is when we are going to access nearby nature and green spaces, we build our own personal relationship with that, right? So yeah, I think it's not answering the question about sort of say social media and how we can use those platforms, but just redefining nature and what it means to spend time outdoors.
Yeah, no, that is really useful, because we can't go to Kanha Tiger Reserve and often I think people undervalue what is just in their backyard or neighborhood and the scope of that, and put nature on a pedestal. But actually it is more accessible. Even one cherry tree in front of your house can give you opportunity for so much introspection, reflection, connection with other beings. And while we're on this subject of inclusion, I wanted to just bring in Amrita of we talked about, how access to nature can include or exclude and how that plays out in urban spaces. You have done a lot of work with under-resourced communities. So what about how nature and well-being is viewed for them, in terms of access to opportunities, or say, funds, or just the money to go somewhere or to have a certain thing that enables you to have an experience, or just even the priority of nature and well-being and the understanding of it in these communities?
I think I'll build on what both Jayshree and Tanya just said. In fact, that one is that recognizing the power that the school space holds to bring that access or make that access possible in some ways. And the second point, which is what Tanya said, which is to not make nature seem like something that is inaccessible from where you live. So there are, if there are public parks, there are, even if there are, there's a line of trees close to the road where the school is or where the community is, even little exercises of observing those, I think you can make it possible in the communities that for example, where Apni Shala schools are. The other thing that I'll also just build on is that sometimes the starting point is where it is something that a student hasn't experienced or hasn't had a trusted adult who has made that connection visible to them. One way that a lot of our teachers also do this is to bring stories into the classroom, which allow that first level of engagement with nature and listening to stories about people that have engaged with nature. So I know that, for example, Salim Mamu and I by Zai Whittaker, it's a beautiful picture book about how she began her relationship with birdwatching. And even just reading that story for students and young people who have never thought of, why should I even observe a bird? Why should I observe the little tailor bird that is on the tree outside, or a fantail that visits, twice a day, just outside the classroom window? Um, uh, I think that these storybooks are really lovely windows for students who have not experienced this, let's say in the family or in the context where there hasn't been someone who's been able to open it up for them to say that, this is what nature can offer to you.
Can I add to what Amrita also said? I'm connecting, we work with very similar children in urban areas. So I'm making a lot of connections here. And something that you said, Shonali, about our students don't have the resources, but some of the experience that I've had. One is a lot of our children who are in the urban setup do have some roots or some connection to the rural or, their native places. So they do have that experience, which they bring back. So like Amrita said, teachers bringing in the stories, letting students also bring their stories. It's a beautiful way of connecting the nature, which they have experienced and somebody else has experienced, and put these two together. The second then from there is creating those little spaces for connection, for nature in the classroom. Like we said earlier about having window, garden and things like that. And also connecting with nearby nature, like Tanya said. So that's a third connection. The fourth one is we understand there is resource crunch always, and taking students on a trip is not always easy with all the permissions, so on. But I think if we keep working at it, if not to a wildlife sanctuary, to a nearby park, certainly becomes possible. To a nearby river becomes possible with parents' support and supervision. And places where we have done is we've told the parents that we really want to take the children there to learn these aspects, to really experience something that you have experienced as children, but your children are not able to experience. We want you to come with you so that safety and all of that is taken care. And parents come very happily. You have ST buses that don't cost much. You get them to bring their own food. That doesn't cost much. You just need the right educators to connect the students and the parents to the nature. And I'm feeling so excited about it because we've done that and we've seen the transformation. We've seen that shift in the parents and the students. Not only in the bonding they were able to feel with each other, like a father and a child and a mother and a child, like that bond in nature between the parent and the child becomes so something that they really remember even now after many years. And at the same time, this continued as a practice on their own because they realized that it doesn't take too much to go to a place by taking a local train or a state transport. It's just making those choices to be with nature and to experience what it can do for you. So there are multiple ways, and just connecting, bringing nature, going to nature, all of these 4 parts to it. When it comes together for a learner, it stays for a long time with them, because in every space they're able to make that connection for themselves. So yeah, resources is a problem, but there are ways to work with that if and it's not always an expensive aspect of doing it. Yeah.
So it does build a stronger bond or nature connection when they do it not only on their own, but with their peers or with their family or their parents.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
said, I think
there's something interesting that I just thought of from what Jayshree said. We have a lot of parents and caregivers of students who are fisher folk from our school community. And the teachers at one point brought in some of the parents to come and share their experience of what it is like to be a person who's fishing as a part of their profession, and that's the work they do. How do they relate to the natural world as fisher folk. And I think that was another connection I could make from just what Jayshree said. There was so much learning that happened just by listening to the stories of this parent, and how the children got really curious about learning about fish from this person who's been engaging with the sea and in a different way.
Okay. That is very interesting, because they see it as a resource and not necessarily as a space for well-being or healing, or and it's a totally different shift in perception to see something that they've probably grown up with their whole lives in this new light and with new potential. Abhi, is there another question?
Yes, yeah. I would like to ask a question on behalf of Mukta. She writes that an important aspect of socio-emotional learning seems to be community and connecting with the people around you. How can nature play a part in this? Okay, just give me a second. I lost. She's a student teacher and would really love to. Just give me a second. Somehow losing out on this.
No, I think that's a really good. I actually had this as one of my questions. Maybe I can also add what I wanted to ask on this aspect, is that from what I understand, maybe she's trying to ask that, nature and well-being can manifest at so many different levels. And for example, Tanya talks about, connections with the self, with the earth, and with the community itself, and from Jayshree's work, connections with the self, with your peers, with your family. So like, how does it integrate, or does nature and well-being come into these various levels of our relationships and our world? I don't know if this is sort of similar to the question.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, sorry, if she also asked if you could give some, she would really love some concrete examples and guidance about being able to integrate these ideologies in the classroom. Thanks.
Yeah, I think one of the core foundations of social-emotional learning is compassion. And when we're talking about compassion, it is for self and others. So it's rooted in the understanding of, about yourself, but at the same time rooted in understanding of interdependence, not just with the immediate circle, but with the global and systemic, components too. So when we go to interdependence and when you go to global components, nature comes in very beautifully, very, seamlessly into this entire picture, that my interdependence is not just with my relatives and my family, but it's also to everything that is coming to me for my survival, for my well-being, for my, for my growth and everything. So that is where, I would say that is one. And we've done that. Like if, for example, if we are, let's say, like just an example of COVID and vaccine, how many people contributed to it and how it has come to you. Also has a lot of examples that come from, all the animals that it would have been tested, or all the other aspects of nature that one brings in. Even the transport, like transport can't go without the components of nature coming in, or just many of those. So each of those examples would connect to nature. And again, then the global connections, like our part in the global community, and what the entire global community here, what I mean is not just the people, but also the natural, physical, the living and non-living components on all of these. So interdependence, immediate and global interdependence, these two components in well-being become very, very important, because then it comes back to that understanding of you as a human, your role, and how does it all help you, gives a different sense of compassion for yourself. And these are the three layers to it. That's how it would connect. I'm sorry. There's just I'm saying too many concepts in one go in few sentences, but very happy to connect with whoever had this question. I'm very happy to connect beyond this as well and share some concrete examples from our work, from C-learning, as well as from cognitive-based compassion training and our own personal experiences too. So.
Thank you, Jayshree. Yeah, we'll be sharing their websites and links to their work, and you can get in touch with them also and have a deeper conversation or ask your more specific questions. We're already past the time, the official time of the session, but people still seem to be here. So if everybody is okay with it, we can continue the conversation. I have only halfway through all the things that I wanted to cover, but I was quite ambitious in all the things that I wanted to cover. But just if people are going to leave, since the time is officially passed, there is a feedback form in the chat box. Please do fill it out. We would, your experience of this session and how we went about it, we'd really like to know what your thoughts. So please do that. There are a lot of links continuously posted in the chat. Just scroll through and I think you'll find what you're looking for. Did Amrita or Tanya wanted to also add to that question on on how does it manifest to various levels, and also about compassion and empathy? How do you, these are such integral concepts even to socio-emotional learning, and how do you bring that out in a nature connection?
Yeah, these are such big questions.
Yes.
So I'm just going to try to share some.
You can share also like just an experience or something that encapsulates this, like theory.
Yeah, I think with respect to sort of relationship between self and the body and community and nature, I think first we need to have conversations and recognize the rupture that exists in our relationship with nature and what are the forces that have caused that rupture. So these conversations I, of course, have with adults all the time, but I think there are ways in which we can have these conversations with children as well, where we first acknowledge that there's something that needs to healing, like that there's some forces have come along that have interrupted our experience and relationship with the natural world. And those are, things like colonialism and capitalism that have really interfered with our relationship with our bodies. So if we are having conversations and doing activities that are sort of, highlighting that even our bodies are nature, and so they function in cycles, and that's our most natural way of being. And yet there is this expectation, this very violent relationship that we now have with our bodies of expecting complete consistency and linearity in our energy levels and in the way that we process emotions. And actually all of that is very moving in spirals and waves and it's cycles, right? So I think the more we support children and adults to connect with that cyclic sort of nature of existence, which includes, everything Jayshree mentioned as well about like interdependence, because we live in this very hyper-individualistic culture, which is not us originally. That is not how we have functioned as a community in our part of the world, right? So even identifying like why it's become so hard for folks to ask for help, like on a program, that is a conversation we always have, because people are coming in seeking belonging and community, and there is a struggle to ask for help. And I think that becomes such an important lesson. And there are just situations that arise where you need to do that, you need to ask for help. And really receive. So I think that is a bunch of a bit all over the place reflections, but I don't know if that connects in any way.
No, it made a lot of sense. So more focus on this interconnections between us as individuals of a community, as well as with other living beings with which we share our spaces and the natural world. Yeah. That's, yeah, and I think we have recognized that connecting with ourselves, connecting with each other is going back to nature. I think that's a big takeaway. It sounds simple, but it's really powerful. Amrita, did you want to add anything? No. Okay. Yeah, I don't even know which question to go to, but maybe since we're almost at the end of our time, I will ask about the story, the move to that section, and then whoever wants to stay longer maybe can. So just as a takeaway for the people here, if just imagine if well-being was sort of a dish that you were serving to an individual that was like a well-balanced or a nutritious meal to nourish individuals, or to sort of embody the spaces that we create, the safe spaces that you'll have talked about in this session. So what would that dish look like, or what are the ingredients that go into that that form the conditions for well-being to come through with our connections with nature or experiences with nature? If you could share your thoughts on this.
So I think for me, one of the major things, I think Jayshree mentioned this earlier as well, is as a facilitator in whatever capacity, really cultivating and deepening and nourishing your own relationship with the natural world and with the more than human world, right? Because you are then holding space for other folks to do that through you. And I know that if I am not getting enough time outdoors, I can be a really grumpy facilitator for other folks. So I'm always like, doing my own time outdoors and really kind of taking time to make nature a part of the everyday in whatever capacity. And I think the second thing is really honoring like lived experience and local knowledge and know-hows that each person is coming with. Nature is not something anyone is an authority on, right? I mean, everyone has something to contribute and share. So even as a facilitator, I feel it's so much about opening up and holding like, oh wow, what can we come up with together, and not and really kind of valuing that more, because then people also feel like, oh yeah, I have something valuable to share, and what I'm sharing matters because it's true for all of us. So I think these two things are quite important for me.
Yeah, thank you. Any of you? Amrita, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think that for me, I think one ingredient of the recipe would be curiosity. I think just being able to open yourself up to learn as you go. And the second piece for me that is critical, I think, is what one of the things that Tanya said, which is that to recognize a lot of the wisdom that each of us carry from our own lived experiences. For me, I think those two would be the most critical ingredients of the recipe: curiosity for exploration and learning, and sharing your own personal wisdom with others.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, to add to that, I very genuinely feel that it needs to be interesting and attractive and very, very simple that the learner can connect with. There's a very famous quote by Senegalese conservationist Baba Diop. In the end, we will conserve what we love, we will love what we understand, and we will understand what we are taught. And I always like to add another line to it, it's like how we are taught. So if we make it very interesting and very, learner-centered and bring it from that, they will definitely understand and they will start to really love, whether it's a socio-emotional space or whether it is nature, and connecting both of them. When they start to really love, it will automatically be conserved for themselves and for others. So that connection will be so deep-rooted. So I think the main ingredient here would be to there will be multiple pieces that we'll be talking about, making it interesting. And it just takes me back to my young children. I'm not, now they're not young anymore, they're 22 and 16. But when they were little kids, like how we really decorated the plate for them. It's the same khichdi and same bread and butter or whatever it is, but cut it into pieces, layer it nicely, and they love the food. And then they want to eat more, and they look forward to another breakfast or another lunch. I think it just comes to the same thing, just making it very, very engaging for younger or older audiences. I think I would say, that would be the key here.
I just wanted to add that that second point, I feel like especially if our participants are children, then we need to honor that wisdom even more. I feel like sometimes, that's so important, right? Like, because with children, they are really observing so beautifully, and not to become an authority on it, but more like say, oh, wow, what can I learn from you? Yeah.
Yeah, so much. I think so much of what you are saying just sort of echoes each other's thoughts and experience, but it's just different angles, and each of them is like gives a new lens into the theme of nature and into this theme. Thank you so much. Really, I've really enjoyed having this conversation. I wish we had more time, but I think we cannot. We've promised ourselves not to go way beyond our deadline, so we're going to try to stick to that. I just at this point would like to invite anybody from the audience, if you would like to share a thought or a personal experience that you might have had in terms of nature and the impact or value that it's brought to your well-being, or the other way around. Now could be a good time for you to share. You could raise your hand or just ask for us to unmute you, and we'd be happy to hear what you have to share. Also, like for the speakers, if there's any like first-hand experience or anecdote from your work that can nicely encapsulate what we've talked about this theme, it would be nice to hear, and we will end on that note.
I can share a little bit. I think that a large part of the connection I started making with nature and the natural world and healing, or that the experience of it being therapeutic, I think was from a very deeply personal experience. About 5 years ago, I had my own journey with mental health. I was experiencing anxiety, and while I was seeking help from a therapist, a doctor, for what I needed help with at that time, I think one of the things that I found really useful at that time was that a lot of the experience with anxiety, and when it visits us and sort of consumes us in our body, mind, is that there's a lot of thoughts that can seem overwhelming. And I think that one way that nature allows us to, in some way, for the lack of a better word, reduce that feeling of anxiety when it visits, is that it helps you come back to the present and just be attentive to what's there. So when I'm on a walk and watching birds, the sound of a certain bird, or to see something that just flew by, and track it and look at how it moves, how it perches on a certain branch, the behavior that it has around a plant or a fruit, the sounds that you hear, how it engages with. I think that when I started doing a lot of that, I could tell that in those spaces, I did not feel as anxious, and I did what was otherwise used to feel very, very overwhelming. I could tell that just being in the space of nature and watching birds was healing on its own for me. And I think that that's one of the things that has helped me. Like I continuously sort of try and find my ways to engage with bird watching and continue to go on nature walks, is because I have found that very, very personal experience of healing from some of these things that I struggle with myself, and I know that it has that power.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amrita, for sharing. I'm glad that it was helpful for you, and to deal with the challenges that you were experiencing, and that it's just as simple as what you shared. I think so much of mental health challenges and stresses come from maybe say paranoia about the future, or like or like regrets, or grieving or living in the past. And if we can help constantly come back and be mindful into the present moment, it can, at least for that time and maybe longer and longer durations, alleviate that those feelings that we're or frustrations that we're experiencing. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I mean, I've learned a lot from this conversation, from what Amrita just said, to the head and the heart, and keeping it interesting and nearby nature. And there's so much more that I think that is to learn from all of you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your work, and like just giving us your time in this conversation. We hope that we'll remain connected and continue this conversation on well-being. We will share your information so you may be contacted in the future. And to the audience here, thank you also for joining us. There is a feedback form. Please do share your thoughts on the session. In terms of staying connected with us, we're on all of the social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Abhisheka has shared the links in the chat. We also have a mailer to which you can subscribe for updates of our work in the future. We will be engaging more with nature educators, and we're growing this community of nature educators. We look at different aspects of nature and bird education. So please stay with us. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you, everybody, for being here today, and have a happy Sunday.
Thank you, everyone, and happy Diwali. For many of us, Diwali started today, or in fact yesterday. So happy Diwali to everyone as well.
Happy Diwali. Thank you, Jayshree. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.